Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Darren Sheffield, and I work as the production record specialist at the Holstein Association USA. I'm one of the individuals that works and develops and supports the Redbook Plus MultiMate software program, which we'll be talking about today. I'm glad you could join us, and hopefully we will provide you a good overview of the program, and you may be able to figure out how it may be able to better assist you with your herd or your business. If you have questions as we go along, feel free to type them into the questions box on your webinar control panel on the right of your screen, and we'll answer them when we stop for questions. This webinar is being recorded today and will be available for viewing later on the Holstein Association USA website and YouTube. So let's get started, and we will be going through the Redbook Plus program and the MultiMate component. Will cover some areas a little bit more in depth than others, depending on exactly what their purposes are and how we feel they may benefit you. We will start here with our show sires screen, which is the first screen that pops up when you use the program, and it is an interface that allows you to look up particular bulls, proven bulls, genomic young bulls, or older bulls, using names or registration numbers or NAAB codes. We can see here that we have a search box along with an ability to change what we're searching for and different databases that we can look at. The default is the available bulls, which are proven bulls that have semen available and that's actively being marketed. So we could search here for a bull by name. So we'll type Planet in, and we'll get results. Now the Planet bull comes up here. We can see this is the bull we're looking for. It shows his NAB number and his registration number along with his name, and we can look at his individual screen. We can search by NAB numbers. We can look up genomic young bulls by selecting that for bulls that don't have any daughters in their proof but are being marketed. That's a new area in the program starting in August. The bulls had been in the program before, but they hadn't been separated out into their own searchable group, and that's a new feature. The Sire Dictionary has all the bulls within the program, including the proven bulls, genomic young bulls that aren't being actively marketed, and some older bulls that go back up over 20 years. And those are used for historical purposes, and in the inbreeding section of the MultiMate program, which we'll talk about later. But let's take a look at Planet's individual screens. These are screens that have information similar to what's in the printed version of the Red Book. There's some more fields, as we'll see as we go through, than what's able to be printed in the Red Book. Plus, you got this information on all kinds of bulls that aren't in the printed Red Book. So there's similar information, but there's more here in the Red Book Plus program. So we can get to him either by double-clicking on his name or clicking on the show button. So we'll do that, and we will get here what we call our bull details screen, which has some multiple tabs with information about the particular bull. We start here on the overview tab, which has general ID information along with some of the TPI components for the bull and the controller and the price that we've received that he's being marketed at. At the top, we can see on every page, we can see his basic ID information along with his TPI, his genomic tested status, that's what the G is, and a change in his TPI from the last time, which is 31. As we move along here, we have a genetics tab, which has some information similar to what's on the other tab, but we're more in depth here with most of the production traits and health traits and the type traits and the composites, along with the actual PTA values, the change from the last time, reliability numbers, daughters in herds, and for all these different traits. And the next tab is the type traits tab, which has all of the linear type traits along with their description. As we can see, for strength, we have a negative number, so our description is frail as opposed to strong, which would show up if we were doing a positive number. And then the common bar graphs we're used to seeing in the bull blocks in the Red Book. One good feature here about the Red Book Plus program is we have that information on bulls that we aren't able to publish in the printed version of the Red Book. You can see those graphs and compare them on some of the genomic young bulls or any bulls that are in the program that may not have that full bull block area in the printed Red Book. On the pedigree tab, we have an extended 3 generations of pedigree behind the bull, which is once again what's used later in the MultiMate in order to avoid inbreeding. We have some inbreeding information, as you can see here in the red, inbreeding percent and then expected future inbreeding. And then some of these animals, like the dam here, we can see by clicking on that teal box some information for her, classification score, PTAs for production, and type, and lactation information. And we have that on the dam and the sire and the maternal grand dam. Moving on to the next tab, we have the other tab, which is a collection of some information that of raw averages for production and type, as we can see here with the daughter and group production averages and the average classification score, along with calving ease and stillbirth information and pregnancy rate, some more in-depth health trait information, AAA and DMS scores that have been reported to us, conception rate information, haplotypes impacting fertility information. We can see we have T's for tested free, and we would have C's in there for carriers. And then we have user-defined fields that can be entered by the user, and trait index calculations that we'll show a little later as far as how those get populated, but those are user-derived information from particular formulas. On the confidence tab, we have daughter and herd information for all of the traits, along with reliabilities for production and health traits and type, along with a confidence range, and then the expected index range based on that confidence range. The 99% reliable planet here has a confidence range for milk of 56, so we can see that while his index for milk is 2323, we can expect his actual PTA information to be somewhere in between the 2267 and the 2379. That's what the confidence range is. And that number would get larger if he had a lower reliability. We have a question regarding the change in the TPI information. We can see here, or change in any information. If we look at the 31 here for planet for TPI, that means he's changed 31, increased 31 from the previous run. If we look at his information on the change for traits, we can see that most all of them are green because they all went up, but in the case of body composite, he decreased, so that's in red. We would see that number in red if it was a decrease. The G is always in that color just to make a distinguishing between the different characters up there. So that's what we're looking at as far as the change is concerned in the color coding. On the bull detail screen, we can pull up multiple screens so we can compare bulls back and forth. Here we'll search for a NAB code number and we'll bring up another screen, and then we have two tabs, and like if we want to compare the type traits for these two particular bulls in the graphs, we can have two tabs and we can move back and forth, and we can open up to 3 of those and make the comparisons, so it's easy to look between two bulls if that's something that the user is interested in doing. So we'll close out here on the bull details, and we will move on to sire selection. The sire selection area is the ability to search the database for specific information on traits that the user is looking for. We can go to criteria, which is the place to start here, so we can set up the search that we want. You can see here as I scroll down quickly, there's a long list of traits. These are the traits that we've seen on those other tabs, and you can search for any of them. There's some default lists here, and the user can save the list and run even the next time after the program's updated. If you install, it will save all of your criteria, and you can rerun the same sort of list you're interested in the previous time. Once again, we can search for the available bull lists, or we can search for genomic young bulls for any areas, or we can even search the sire dictionary to look at all the bulls that are in the program. Well, let's put in a simple couple traits here and take a look at what we find. We can, on the available items, we can double click on a trait and bring it over to the selected items. So I'm going to double click on PTA milk and PTA type. We'll keep it simple with a couple traits. So we have these. If we wanted to remove them, we could double click on them in the selected items and it will remove them. We have a field here called the operator, which we can double click. We can change that. It defaults to the most common one for most traits, but there may be some traits where you might be looking for a different, look for less than rather than greater than, so you could change that here, but we'll leave that alone. And then there's a value. You can double click on that, and you get a box that you put a value in for that particular trait. For milk, we're going to put 1,000, so we're looking for bulls that are greater than 1,000 PTA milk, and we'll put 1 point on type, and then we can, so we're going to look for bulls that fit those two criteria that have semen being marketed that are on our available bull list. We'll click run. We see there's 229 bulls, so that's a pretty long list. So we can say, well, that's a little too big. We can make an adjustment. We can do 2 for type. So we're looking for bulls that are 2 on type. And now we're down to 72. If we want to take a look at those 72 bulls now, we can click on reports, and we will get a display of those bulls that meet that criteria. We can sort this with any trait that we are interested in. Let's sort that by TPI. We can click on that and sort that by TPI, and we can see explode here is the highest TPI bull that meets our requirements, or if we were more interested in which one's the highest milk bull, we can click on that. It does it in reverse order first, but we can do it again. And when we see the planet is the highest milk bull at 2323. Here, the user can save this bull list if they want to manually adjust this, and then before they save it and kick some bulls out, even though they meet their requirements, they can click on that and move them around, or they can add some other bulls to the list. We'll do a little bit with something that later, but we'll move on to the other tabs here within sire selection. The Fields tab is an area where the user can change what appears in the reports regardless of what the criteria is. There's a default set there which we saw, but we can add a trait that hasn't been there before. Let's scroll down through here and find productive life, which isn't on our defaults, and we want to add that and see that information. And we have all these same things we did before, and I'll click on a multi-trait index, which we'll look at a little later. But we've added those into our reports, and as we go back to the reports, we can see that we've added those fields into our report. And then we can, from here, we can print these reports. If we click on print preview, we will see what it looks like when we print the report. We can see how it fits on the page and that sort of thing if we need to make adjustments. We can also export this in different formats. We can set to have a comma delimited format, and then we can export that and get a file that we can import into a spreadsheet and then use that or to sort it or import it into a herd management program or something of that nature. Let's, on these last two tabs, we have a couple things that we can use to make some additional information to sort bulls. The first one here being the mating index. The mating index is the simple little old-fashioned, as I would call it, mating interface where the user can pick up to 4 different traits, and it calculates a mating index for the bulls in your list. Regardless of, there's no concern for inbreeding or anything like that. It's just the ones that match best with these linear traits. So if we were looking for a bull that had stronger foreudder attachments and stronger udder cleft and was deeper bodied, we could calculate that. We'll get a pop-up here of our list with a mating index, and we can see this Alta Triangle bull is the best from our list of 2 on type, 1,000 on milk bulls for those particular traits, and we can see some other good ones as it sorts by mating index. The multi-trait index is a little bit more of an involved bull comparison where we can create something that's similar to our TPI formula or whatever the user would want, that they can put the weights on their own traits that they would like. So let's create a fairly simple one here where let's pick 4 traits, similar to how we did under criteria. We'll pick PTA milk, PTA protein, PTA type, and PTA productive life. So we're going to make a 4-trait index here. For this example, we want to weigh them evenly. If we want numbers similar to the TPI number, we need our weights to equal 100. So we're going to double-click on the weight and change each one of these to 25. So what we're going to have is a list that's evenly distributed, an index that's evenly distributed between these 4 traits. And also, to make it look similar to our TPI formula, we would want to add a constant that's similar to what's added to every bull in the TPI formula. We'll put 1832. That's the most recent number we've used as an adjustment constant. So we can calculate up to 4 of these by clicking on which index we want to define, and we'll hit calculate. So it's calculated a multi-trait index for every bull in the system using our measurements here. If we go back to the reports, we'll see we have our user multi-trait index that we added before, and we can sort that. And once again, we see our planet bull that we've looked at before that has user multi-trait index of 2213. He's the highest one from our bull list. It's very similar to his TPI numbers, but as you look down, we see some more variation between the actual TPI formula and the simple little index that we built. The user can build up to 4 of these with whatever traits that they want, and those are stored in there until the user overwrites them with a new formula, and they can be used to sort bulls, and rather than just having hard cutoffs, it can weigh the traits in whatever way the user would like. We'll move on to the next item here on the left, which is evaluate selection. We'll do this fairly quickly. The evaluate selection has a list of graphs that can be created based on your bull list that shows how they compare to the average of the available bulls. As you can see here, here's the TPI overview. One of the things that this is used for most is when a bull list is created, the user can go to this AAA and DMS summary and get the bulls grouped into which AAA grouping they're in. So we can click on AAA and it'll sort our bulls into those lists, so we see how those are distributed among the areas if you use AAA as part of your mating program. The economic summary allows the the user to choose those bulls, and we're not going to go through that today because it takes a little bit of time to do and you have to adjust for prices, but we can see how those bulls would affect the economic viability of the herd going forward, at least based on their PTA information. So the input bull data quickly is an area where the user can add, change the information that they are allowed to edit within the program. Those user-defined fields we saw on the bull detail screen, along with the price if the user has a different price than what has been reported to us, or if they wanted to change the DMS or AAA codes that they use for a particular bull. The mating advisor is a pedigree-based mating program to mate an individual animal based on their sire stack. So the user can enter a sire stack for a female, like a heifer or something, and do a pedigree-based mating with his bull list for that specific pedigree, and it can be used to reduce inbreeding. So let's see how this works. Let's say we were looking for 1,000,000 daughters. So this time I searched for a NAB code for 1,000,000, which you should be able to search for names or NAB codes. So we'll click on his name there, and we'll say that the grand dam here was Shottle, and we'll find Shottle by typing in his NAB code, and we'll use Durham for the grand dam. And then we can calculate, we can set some information here. We can set an inbreeding percent of 4 that uses the 3 generations to calculate an inbreeding percent. So I've done that here, and we get some evaluations based on that sire stack from our bull list, and we can see the Dayton bull here has a mating index calculated of 100. He does have an inbreeding of 3.1, so there's some inbreeding there. And then we can see we have some other choices here that don't have any inbreeding that's calculated in 3 generations. So this is a program that can be used in order to do a heifer mating based on a sire stack, where we don't have any information or don't have a file to load in the particular information on that female. But we want to move on here quickly to our MultiMate portion of the program, which is the second main portion of the program, which can be used to mate cows in a particular herd using the bulls selected during sire selection. If it's the first time the program has been used, you'll be prompted to enter herd information. The second time last herd you used will automatically come up. I'm going to click on herd info here, and you can see you can have a multiple list of herds. This is my list of 30-some herds that I work with here on the program. Some of them are examples, some of them are real herds that that I run some matings for. There's also the ability, if you're using a heifer herd and a cow herd, you can move cows from one to the other within those 2 files. But we're going to create a new herd here. So we'll click on new herd, and we'll call it webinar, and we'll have that herd as number 31 here. And if we go to cow data, we'll see there's nothing loaded here for the cows, since we haven't put that information in for this new herd yet. But there's a couple different ways we can get that. We can manually enter information here by we can enter information from the pedigrees right here, and we can enter information from our classification sheet, but we can also import this information from files, and we'll show you how to do that now. We can click on the import button, and we'll get a question about, do you want to flexible import for cow data. A flexible import is the ability to import information from a non-standard mating file. We create mating files, but you can also import information from herd management software or any other source that you may have. Let's take a look at how the flexible import works here. There is the ability to make a setup where you select the traits that are in the file that you have that you can import. You can see here the available traits that you can import from your file. You can also save a setup here, which I will bring up a saved setup. There's a button here called Preview where you can load up a particular file and see if it's set up correctly. We'll find the file that we want to add to the program. Here we're looking for a comma-separated file. We'll do that, and we'll click Open, and you can see what we're going to import because we have cow ID and registration number and age and sire and dam and maternal grandsire. That's what's in the file, and we can see that it's importing right as all those fields make sense. If we were actually importing this herd today, we'd hit Import. It would do the same thing, not just with the first line like it showed you here on the preview. It would import all that information into the program. But let's exit out of there because we're going to pull up. Instead of that, we're going to go to Import, and we'll say no to the flexible import because we're going to use a file derived from the Holstein Association website. It then asks you if you want to overwrite the cows for the herd. In this case, since there's not any, it doesn't matter. If you had the same animals and wanted to add new data from a file, you would put yes. If you had additional cows to what were already in the program, we would answer no. So we'll click on yes, and we'll click the file that we're looking for, this .mat file, which is the extension for a Holstein mating file. And as we can see, we get information here on females with linear information and pedigree information along with production and lactation information. And we have cow IDs and barn names over here, and we can click on another cow and look at additional information. We also have a tab up here called Herd Data, which shows the same information in a format where each cow is on an individual line. It also has, as we see here, STA values rather than just linear values here. So if we're going to do a genetic mating, we can look at that information, and we'll show you how to use that later. It may be useful, if we're talking about like genomic tested heifers that don't have classification scores but do have those STAs for the linear traits. Now there's a few different tabs here where we can set up how the mating works. Under mating goals, we have the area where we set our goals for the linear traits. There's a default here, a breed average. There's a couple other defaults, high type and maximum value. We'll set that at maximum value, but the user can change any one of those numbers to whatever they're looking for. So if they're more focused on a particular trait, they can move that number up so that it's more likely to pick cows that are below that value. And then we can decide how many traits we're going to look at. The default is 3. We can set the weight here. So that means if an individual traits get selected, that's the weight that gets used in the final calculation of the mating index. There's a couple defaults here, economic and equal. We're looking at the economic weighting, and once again the user can change that to whatever they want. There's also the production side here, which is grayed out, but it works very similar to the type side. It's grayed out because the percentages you can see down here, the default is 100% for type and 0 for production. We can change that up to 40% for production, but since the general idea is that while sire selection is maybe best used for corrective selection for production, corrective mating is best done on a type basis, so that's the default. But the user can change that and change their production goals and weights if they so desire. Under mating setup, we have a few different things that the user can adjust that impacts what they get on their mating results tab. There's different types of mating: linear, which uses the linear scores for the cows; genetic, which uses those STAs we talked about; and pedigree, which uses the sire and the maternal grandsire and the great-grandsire as a sire stack in order to create a mating based on that, to avoid inbreeding and figure out what that animal might need, usually used for heifers that don't have genomic information. We can include III and DMS in the calculation if the user is interested in that. We can choose the type of inbreeding that we want, inbreeding limitation that we want. There's the maximum inbreeding percent, which sets a hard cap on the number that we're looking for, or optimized genetics, which calculates an inbreeding depression, and if the mating index is still higher, it'll go a little bit above our limitation. We'll set the maximum inbreeding percent here. Now, since this is 3 generations, it doesn't have some of the built-in inbreeding that all Holsteins may have, so our numbers are lower than some of what we normally talk about. But 625 is perhaps a little close, but that's generally kind of thought of as the standard where for the 3 generations. But we'll put that at 4 here instead. There's a couple other things here where you can exclude genetic recessives. Well, the default is not to do that, but if you have a double cross, it would avoid that if you chose that. Haplotypes impacting fertility, the same thing, except for their doubles are automatically excluded there unless the user were to take those out. And the user can decide whether to use calving ease bulls in their evaluations on for heifers or that sort of thing by entering calving ease information on the heifers and then selecting a level for the bulls. Then down at the bottom we can see the information that shows up on our mating results screen. So this is the default here. It has, as we can see, ID, barn name, traits, NABs, mating indexes, and inbreeding percent. But let's say we wanted short names on there as well, so we could click the 3 choices for short names and move those into whatever position we want. So we're going to move those up here. So you can do that however you want it to be on your mating results when we get done with that. So moving on to the next tab, we have the semen restriction tab, where we decide what we want to do, what bulls we want to use, and how much semen we want to distribute among the herd. Here we need to load a bull list from sire selection, or we can manually create a bull list or load a save bull list. But we're going to go back to sire selection real quickly and make a new list, and we're going to look at bulls with TPIs over 2,200 and run. We see we get 6 bulls. We'll bring up the report, make sure it's what we're looking for. Since it's there, it now appears on our MultiMate list here. Now, as I said, we can manually adjust this. So as we look at this, we see we have both Man-O-Man and his clone. We're probably not going to use both of those bulls. So we can go to manually select bulls down here, and we can take Man-O-Man and remove him from our list. Let's say there's a genomic young bull we just bought semen for that wasn't on our list because we didn't search for them. His name's Clark. We can go over here. We can type in letters. If we type C, it'll take us to the top of the C. If we type in CL, it'll take us there. We said he's a genomic young bull, so he's not in this list, so we click on that. We do the same thing. By highlighting a bull and hitting CL, we get Clark. We can add him. And so we have Man-O-Man off the list and Clark added to the list, and we can save that and close it. And then we have those bulls here in our herd. Now we can select a semen restriction, so we can put a restriction on the first mating or all the mating choices. Or none. So let's select all mating choices. Now we can pick an individual bull and put a certain amount on them, or we can pick multiple bulls by using our control button and highlighting them like this, and then we can go here and let's enter 15 and for the first choice and 25 and 25 for the second and third, and save that. So it gets 15, 25, and 25 for all of those different choices. Under the mating order, there's the ability to change which order the herd is mated in. It calculates, there's a rough calculation on the best cow or the worst cow based on STA values or linear values, and you can choose best or worst first or just leave it at random. But since now we have a list of cows and a list of bulls, we can go to mating results and we can click the start button in order to do our mating here, and we get some additional buttons that come up here, and it'll show us here which, by hitting process, it'll process an individual cow, and we can see which cow we're going to do next, what traits we're going to process here over on the left hand side. We're going to do cow ID 607 here, and we're going to be looking at these type traits for her, udder depth, forudder attachment, foot angle. If we click process, we will get her mated as well. We can find a particular cow. We'll find cow 38 and process that one, so it does that even if it's not in the particular order. Or we can just go ahead and hit the process all button and do the whole herd. So it goes through and does the whole herd. We can sort this list in different ways. We can sort by the barn number. There's two different ways you can sort here. There's a numeric sort, which is what we did by clicking on the white column header. So we sorted this by in numeric order. Or if we want to sort by name, see if we use that column header, it doesn't work because it's a numeric sort, but the gray bar is an alpha sort and does the herd list in alphabetical order. So we can sort by, cows, barn name or their HMID number. Now if we go to mating summary, we will see our average of the traits for the particular bulls we use, but we also see our semen order, so we see which bulls got used in our mating. It also shows up on our semen restriction tab, the same information. And you can see Freddie didn't come up with a mating index high enough to be used in this particular mating setup, and Man 2 didn't get used very much. But let's just try something here where we go through and change some of this information. Instead of maximum value here on the linear goals, we'll change this to breed average. And instead of economic, we'll go to equal for the weight. And let's add 40% in on production. So if we enter 40 there, it'll change that to 60. So we've got a 40% on production. And instead of a linear mating, let's do a genetic mating this time. And let's go back to mating results, and we can hit start, and we can process this all again, and we're going to get a different set of results because we've set up a different area of focus, and the user can work with that and see and get the information they want. There's different results you can get based on what traits you're looking at, the emphasis you put on them, what semen restriction you put on particular bulls, and that sort of thing. And once again, same thing, we can sort this information so we can look at it in a similar fashion we did before. If we go back to the mating summary, we can see that Freddie got used. Man was now one of the more popular bulls in the list based on these new settings. I think if we look, Massey is the most popular bull here, and he was in the middle under the last settings, and we can do all kinds of different setups that would get us a different list and get one that any user could find useful for their herd. If we go back to the mating results here, there's a few things we can do on this screen. We can print the results. We can look at that here on the print preview. We have a printed form, and if you print it out, it'll look just like this with our choices. It'll show whatever columns we had in on the on the main screen. We can also export this information to be used to entered into a herd management software or a spreadsheet. We can set export parameters, whether we want a comma delimited file or some other delimiter, whether we want a header line, or whether we're exporting, directly into PC Dart. There's a format for that that can be used. So if we do that, we can export. We'll get a text file that has the information in it in this case, a comma delimited format with the fields that we have on here. The user can go to the mating setup and set up however they wanted to do that. Like I said, there's a PC Dart. There's an actual format there where the user would want, first and second NAB codes as their only, and cow IDs as their only areas, and saying yes to the PC Dart will add the column in differentiating cows from heifers, so which is necessary for importing into the program. And the other herd management softwares usually can import similar sort of things, but the format's a little different or perhaps a little bit more flexible. One more tab here that we have is the best matings tab, and just to quickly go over what this does, it's the reverse of the normal mating process. If we have a particular bull that we bought some semen on and we wanted to use that on the best cows from the herd list, pick out the best mating index of the cows for the bulls rather than the other way around, we can use this. So let's say we had 10 straws of Clark semen and we wanted to see what best cows use it. We could do this. We could process the matings. It would calculate the mating index for all the cows in the herd and give us the 10 best results. So, the user can mark cows as do not mate if they're not ready to be bred or whatever, and have a list of cows that are going to be ready to mate soon, and they can pick the best cows for a particular bull in a similar fashion to what they did before. So we're here at about the 45-minute mark, so I guess it's probably time we've gone through all of the pages. If we have any questions, you can type those into the question box on the left, and we'll try to get those answered. There's a question regarding if you want all of your cows and only some of them are classified, how you can get all that information in, or do you have to manually enter that? There's a few different ways you can go about that. A file derived from classification would obviously just have the cows that are classified. But if the herd, if all the animals are in our system, are identified, and we can create a pedigree information based on that, if we can get an inventory file from either the processing center or get a list from a herd management software, we can run a list that would include that pedigree information and include that along with the classification information. It may be good in certain circumstances to break up them into two groups, but it's not necessary, so you can maybe do two different matings based on the information that you have. But it's possible to do that, or to even create two different files, one from a classification file and one from like the herd management software or that sort of thing, and import them both. As we saw, there was an area where you don't have to overwrite the whole herd, so you can actually import two files into the same herd. The question is regarding whether PC Dart data can be sent to obtain information for non-classified animals. All we would really do if the animals are registered in, with the Holstein Association or ID'd with us would be identification information. So a list, an inventory exported from PC Dart could be used to create a list that included non-classified animals. There's additional question about importing information or exporting information into PC Dart. The program should, while PC Dart isn't incredibly flexible, it is possible that everything's set up in order to move information back and forth with Redbook Plus MultiMate. If you have some more questions regarding this, you can give us your contact information, and someone will be in touch with you directly. Well, it doesn't seem like we have any more questions, but we'll stay on here for a little bit longer and and see a couple minutes. If anybody does think of any questions later on, they can call the Holstein Association and with some questions, and we'd be happy to help them. As I said before, my name's Darren Sheffield, so you can ask to talk to me, or there may be some other individuals that may be able to help you with your questions. But there's a question regarding guidelines for parameters when setting out the bull criteria. I'm taking this to mean, are there limits to what can be entered in the sire selection? And basically anything that's a legitimate value can be searched, so we can look for values that are greater than or equal to anything in the sire selection for any of the traits. And there's operators that function in any way that someone might be looking for a particular trait. So if that's what's meant by guidelines, it's flexible that the user can search for anything that's there within the sire selection interface. Well, it looks like there's no more questions, so I think we'll wrap this up. Thanks again for viewing today. This webinar has been recorded and it's available will be available on the Holstein Association website and YouTube channel next week. So, thank you.